Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jody.
Mike and I just had a rare moment. Right before starting this, Mike said, "What, aren't you in the mood to laugh?" And I said, "No, that doesn't happen, Mike."
Jody, it happens to the best of us from time to time. It's when you're in a high stress mode, you realize you screwed up something from a technical perspective and it had a negative impact on others. And now we're behind on time. But and now everybody knows.
Everybody knows. But you know when this sort of thing usually happens is when I'm trying to pack things in really tight, which is... And we're recording on a Friday, which I don't normally do. I just make exceptions for special people. And there's just so much going on. But that also happens this time of the year. For me, end of the year, I'm trying to finish up a lot of things. So that's also a time when it happens, which takes us into the topic we want to talk about anyway, which is wrapping up one year and beginning the next.
Absolutely. It's important. I mean, we're just wrapping up one of my favorite times of year, which is that period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And spoiler alert, we recorded these things in advance for about 2 weeks before Christmas. So I still have 2 more weeks to enjoy this period of time. But when this thing goes live, we'll have already wrapped up that time period. We'll have begun the part of new beginnings. And ideally, you've taken the time to reflect beforehand. You took that time, whether it was between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is where I like to do it, or it was between Christmas and New Year's, and you've thought about all the amazing things that happened in the previous year. And now it's probably my least favorite time of the year, which is right at the beginning of the year, because I realize I've got so much stuff that's in front of me that I've got to do or I want to do. And I really should take the mindset of I get to do. But this is a tough part of the year for me because everything just starts over again. We start at zero.
Yeah, and that can be tough. There's 2 ways to look at it. It can be tough because you have to start over, but it can also be a really good thing because you get to start over. You get to start at zero.
That's exactly right. I mean, and I would actually challenge a lot of people to say, you can kind of do the same thing every day. Every day is a new day, which sounds cliche, but you have an opportunity to make the best of whatever's in front of you. The stuff that's happened in the past, you really can't change. You can influence, you can reset expectations, you can adjust, but we've got to continue to, I think it was Walt Disney has been known to say, or was known to say many times, just keep moving forward. So we keep moving forward. And I thought that's what we would talk about for this episode is how do we get the year off to a good start?
Is there anything you do? Okay, 2-part question. Anything you do in particular to get a year off to a new start, and anything you're doing differently to get 2020 off to a good start?
Yeah, one thing I'm doing differently to get 2020 off to a good start is I'm sharing what I do to get the year off to a good start in the form of a sprint. And we're going to run a couple of different sprints through each month as we go through the year. And there are some interesting ones. And we're still kind of working through some of the details, but the first one is going to be getting the year off to a good start. The second one is going to be around loving your customers, which is going to be the February sprint. In March, we'll talk about spring cleaning. In April, we'll talk about not being an April Fool. And then in May, it'll be May Day, I need help. But there's a theme, and we'll include information in the show notes about each of these. But to get back to the specific question, one of the things I do is I like to sit down and plan things out in the context of 30, 60, 90-day plans, 180-day plan, 270, and 365. So I look at the first quarter. I then plan out for the first half of the year. I then plan out to where I should be by the end of Q3. And then I have my ultimate 365-day or annual goals that I'd like to accomplish. So planning is a critical component here for me. And this isn't the same as goal setting and execution and doing some of that type of planning. This is more about what do I want to accomplish over the entire year. And as I go through that, I go through a decision process to start to filter out what do I not want to do? What do I want to avoid? And we'll talk about this in the sprint in the context of things that people have heard me talk about before: territory planning, account planning. Account planning can be really similar to putting together your own personal business plan. whether you're talking about your own business or the businesses that you support. Territory planning is about how do you determine what type of customers are you looking for? Where are your areas of focus? How do you put together things like guiding principles? And then the more tactical stuff like the call plan is what am I doing on a day in, day out basis from setting expectations, setting objectives, and establishing next steps.
Tell us a little more about the sprints. This may have come up on other episodes, but let's get a refresher because I think this is important for 2020. Joining Mike on these sprints is a great way. I've been through one of them, and I love what you're doing with these sprints, Mike, and they can really help you focus and get something done in a short amount of time.
Yeah. And I mean, the best feedback I got on the sprint that we did in November, and we ran the same one in December, just to give some other people an opportunity to go through it. And all the feedback was really positive. There's some iteration in December based on what we heard in November or what I heard in November. But the coolest experience is that my 14-year-old got his zone time, which was one of the goals he had. And now he got his zone time because he worked really hard and he did the right things and he executed. But when we went through the goal setting and execution sprint, which was the one that kicked off in November, one of his takeaways was that it's not just about setting that overarching goal. It's about the smaller things that you do that get you to the goal. And within those smaller things, the measurables that you can use to keep track of whether or not you're performing. He put this together. His goal was that he had set early in this, it was late September, early October. It was to get his zone time in his backstroke. And he achieved that a couple of weekends ago at a swim meet. The intention behind the sprints, I think there are a lot of people out there who talk about how to execute on certain things. They talk about concepts, but they don't bring it down to a level where you can actually start putting into practice and realize that there's a daily practice that you can execute on in order to really be successful and do the work around these things. Now, some people can block out a couple of hours, go through their entire planning session and get things done and be in good shape. I'm one of those folks who likes to do things on a daily basis to build a muscle, to build the strength to go in and execute consistently. So the sprint is a 15-day series of emails with practical exercises to go through, examples of how I go through those exercises, and a couple of videos sprinkled in. So there's clear calls to action, clear coaching, or I guess I'd call it training because it's not direct coaching at an individual one-on-one basis, but clear training or conveying of information, clear set of things to put into practice, and then examples of what it looks like when I had put the previous day's work into practice. And these go out at about 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm still working on figuring out exactly how to make the timing work, but it's at 10 o'clock in the morning East Coast time is when those emails go out. And they're all sent through Kajabi, which is the platform we use for the course. And this is a way for me to continue to create really good content that makes an impact on folks and helps people execute.
And you had fun with them too. Your personality really came out in those, which is fun to see, getting to work with you so much and then seeing your personality start to come out in these sprints. It's been a lot of fun. Mike, I'll tell you one thing I'm doing differently is I used to focus on a year goal. Well, I'd maybe set 5 to 7 for the year. And then I would break it down and figure out what do I need to do this quarter, this month, this week to get there. And I still do that. But one big shift I'm making, and this, I don't know if this seems like, well, I'll just tell you and then we'll see. But I've started focusing because I get a head start when I set goals for a new year or whatever. I get a head start. So I'm already doing it, even though as we record this, we're not in the new year. I start looking at the next 5 minutes. I saw a quote from Tom Peters that said, excellence is the next 5 minutes. And so I've stopped looking so much at the long term, and like Mike's sprints that really shorten the length of what you're looking at. I even start looking at the next 5 minutes, that if the next 5 minutes are going to be excellent, what do I need to do? And that makes me do things like, for example, before we recorded, if I made sure the next 5 minutes were excellent, I would have double checked all the links we were going to use and say, okay, now when Mike shows up, because I know we have a very short window to record today, we'll be recording 1 minute after our scheduled time. So that's the sort of thing I have started looking at. And then when you take a bigger goal and break that down, I know it can be a challenge to say, well, really, what can I do in 5 minutes that's going to move me towards that goal? Well, there are a lot of things. And I know weight loss, even though that doesn't have to do with sales, people who set weight loss goals all the time. And I know weight loss in 5 minutes, you can say, oh, well, I can do 10 push-ups or I can not eat the cookie. That's what excellence in the next 5 minutes looks like.
Yeah, I think the thing that it makes me think about, Jody, and weight loss was one of the examples I gave in the sprint. And to clarify, there were two things. There was a sprint that was run, which were those daily emails, and then there was the videos around the 25 days of Christmas, which I'm still in the process of wrapping up, and those will be available. We can share a YouTube link there. That's where a little bit more of the personality type stuff came out. But as we go through and look at the way that we execute, it's important to have both a long-term focus. So knowing where are we actually pointing the ship? Where are we going? But also understand that it's the incremental steps that help get us there, which is really tough to do because there's some people who are really good at doing a lot of really hard work and doing the incremental steps. And then there are some people who are really good about talking about where they want to go and have this amazing vision. It's rare to find folks who can alternate between both of those. And I think this idea of the next 5 minutes is really important because it creates a level of focus that you can have on what is the next thing that I can do that's going to make a significant impact. And I forget, is it Keller wrote the book, The One Thing. And I think we reviewed that on the podcast at one point in time. But one of the focusing questions in The One Thing is something to the effect of, what's the one thing I can do right now that makes everything else irrelevant or unnecessary, or something to that effect. So there are a number of folks who get into these practices on how do you create focus. What it begs the question for me is, why do we continue, if there's so many ideas around how to do this, and there's so much information about how you put it in practice, like a 12-week year or essentialism or The One Thing, why do we continue to struggle with it? Yeah,
that's a good question. Because every year there's a new book that comes out about it, and there's room for Mike to do his sprints. And we do continue to struggle with it. So something continues to pull us in the other direction. It's hard. It really is hard to focus on the one thing or to cut everything else out.
It's really hard. And so what I'm going to ask the audience to do is share with Jody and I. You can do this through catalystsale.com in the live chat, or you can send direct messages on Twitter or LinkedIn. Let us know what you do to maintain focus, prioritize things, and execute. And I'll throw another question out there. Why do you think there's always a new flavor of the month or flavor of the year when it comes to these things? We know the basic stuff. Treat people well, do your work, do what you say. There's these common things that we do on a daily basis that we ask our kids to do, yet in our lives, we fail or we fall short. And I think a lot of it comes down into the busyness. And we're in that period of year where there's a lot of busyness that happens. So I'd love to hear the feedback from the rest of the folks out there, anybody who has some experience that they'd like to share. And if you'd like to come on the podcast one of these days to talk about this, because you've got some great way that you figured out how to solve this problem, I'm happy to have that conversation too.
All right, Mike Simmons, what's your last words for us in getting this new year off to a great start?
Do the work, have fun. Actually, I'm going to steal something from Camille Clemens, whose podcast might go live before this or late, or maybe a little bit later. But work hard and be nice. She summarized that really well on the podcast episode that we recorded. Work hard and be nice. If you do those things, good things tend to happen.
I love it. That just sounds like a great year right there. Work hard and be nice. Well, thank you, Mike. 2019 was a great year all around. So thank you for that. Thanks for another great episode. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.